A friend request, written by Paul Sear, Chapter 3, Opposition to Devotion. So I'm going to get right to the point and keep this chapter short. I want to get right into the intricacies of controlling the mind and senses by appropriate action and devotional service to the Lord. Now this chapter is important to understand. It's described in the Bhagavad Gita that there is a predominating personality governing the opposition to the Lord's service, basically the conception of Satan. Whoever holds this post is not of great relevance. The Lord describes this as lust. Lust can be defined as sexual desire, but it also can encapsulate the entire spectrum of rebellion towards the loving service of the Lord. Sex desire is basically keeping the embodied living entity imprisoned within material existence. In our current field of activity, this sex desire is the main motivation for fruitive activity. It's very difficult for the fruitive workers to become and remain motivated to work without the encouragement of sex. So it stimulates the material mode of passion and drives one to attain the fruits of one's labor. This is not at all good, because the material mode of passion, which is the foundation of the sex desire, has a peculiar defining characteristic. It begins very sweet and ends tasting just like poison. This identifying characteristic of the material mode of passion, if thoroughly examined, holds true to this trait. So this lust and mode of passion is the foundation for the sex desire, which, in reality, is a direct transformation of spiritual bliss, proof that there is a very palatable bliss lying within the existence of the eternal spiritual being. However, the bliss found in sexual intercourse is very minuscule in comparison to the bliss found in spiritual activity in relation to the Lord's service. Due to a want for proper understanding, this is unknown to us. Therefore, the attainment of sexual bliss becomes one's main driving force for activity. It is compared to a drop of water to be found within the dry, severe desert of the material realm. It lends proof that water does exist. However, one drop of water can hardly satisfy one dying of thirst in the desert. So this sex desire is the acute manifestation of material existence. The embodied living entity would not continue to reproduce, nor take the trouble of raising the young without this motivation of sex. Now, this lust has a direct link to the demoniac nature sometimes embraced by the embodied spiritual beings situated in this world. The Lord explains that this lust manifests within the heart in a peculiar fashion, a process, lending to the reason why a person, as if by force, can be deviated while desiring to act appropriately. Please allow me to illustrate. When one's mind dwells upon a particular sense gratification, when one desires to enjoy a certain sense object, an attachment develops. This can be in reference to sex or any other material sense pleasure, manifesting acutely in sex desire. This attachment is the manifestation of material contact with what is known as the material mode of passion. From this attachment, lust develops. When lust goes unfulfilled, anger arises. From anger, the material mode of ignorance takes hold in the form of wrath. Now from this wrath, all good judgment becomes distorted and one gives up one's purified intelligence. The result is a type of coup by the force of the mind. It overruns the intelligence, and the transcendental spiritual being comes under the dictation of the uncontrolled mind. From this point, one is no longer thoroughly in control. By standing back and examining one's own activities, one can observe all this taking place. One may very diligently desire change in one's activities, a resolution. If everything was under one's control, every resolution would be successful. However, everyone gets practical experience. Resolutions are infamous for being unsuccessful. This is on account of this lust, described as the greatest enemy of one situated in this world. So one under the dictation of one's uncontrolled mind contaminated with lust can give no good counsel. This doesn't stop individuals from desiring to give counsel. Therefore, the leader, along with all who submit to their instructions, are factually bewildered. Due to a contaminated intelligence, contaminated by this lust, the bewildered living entity is very reluctant to hear about how all this is taking place. Real living is to be had by one who controls the mind through the agency of purified intelligence by engaging in the service of the Lord. So this other state of consciousness can be described as not living, because there is factually no one at the wheel of the ship. All one's activities in this described state of consciousness, mixed with lust, are the result of reaction after reaction in accordance with the governing laws of the material modes of nature, tossing the embodied living entity here and there. Sometimes one comes in contact with good and becomes very happy for some brief time. Other times one meets with evil and becomes very unhappy. One so situated becomes very bewildered how things seem to fall out of the sky all around them, causing distress. Unfortunately, on account of a want for proper understanding, one may take all this as random chaos. In reality, by performing what is described as vikarma, the execution of unauthorized fruitive activity, one is the design architect of all one's own misery. This is described as being inherently different from one's natural situation, the union of devotional service to the Lord. This situation is described by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita as living in vain, or not living. A peculiar trait of one so situated is that they see only what they desire to see, like in the movie The Sixth Sense. When the boy describes how he can see dead people, he declares they don't see each other, they only see what they want to see. So this is not at all good. It gives impetus to the action of pretending to be asleep. A person sleeping can be awoken, while one pretending to be asleep shall never be woken. This is not at all a desirable state of consciousness. Most people are not so inclined to go against the grain. It's explained that whatever a great man does, or especially in our present situation, woman does, all strive to emulate. However, when the person everyone is emulating has fallen under the sway of the uncontrolled mind and senses due to this lust, everything on all levels is factually ruined. There is no good to come from all this mental speculation. The most prominent example of this in recent times is Jim Jones and his followers. His facade was complete snake oil, illusion. The values he was suggesting could be described as genuine. He proposed that all races live in harmony, love one another. Simultaneously, he unceremoniously presented himself as a supreme father, which he was not. Therefore, everything concluded in complete disaster. His followers cannot really be blamed. Their intentions were genuine. Still, they met with a grave consequence. Such is the dark nature of this material atmosphere. Could anyone make Jim Jones listen to reason? The answer is no. He was deeply under the sway of this lust. He enthusiastically took shelter of the speculations of his uncontrolled mind. Therefore, he could not see through the smoke and dust of his own misunderstandings and was destroyed. Unfortunately, he didn't just destroy himself. He brought a lot of innocent people with him. This is the demoniac mentality under the sway of lust. Prabhupada was once walking and came upon a dead snake being devoured by ants. He used it as an example of an impersonalist guru paying the due retribution deserved to former followers. Try to see how this is all taking place. By misleading others, a leader under the sway of lust is committing a great crime against their followers. Therefore, these victims must come back and attain retribution for the crimes committed. And the dark material atmosphere perpetuates onward, all being stimulated by this material lust, the greatest enemy of the inhabitants of this world. Now lust shall never be satisfied. Just as a fire shall never be extinguished by a constant supply of fuel, the situation can be compared to the grave consequence of an out-of-control train racing towards an immovable mountain. It's sure to end in disaster. Now one cannot declare, I shall no longer be influenced by this lust, while sitting idle. It's not possible to accomplish this, because just like everything else, this mode of passion, this lust, is under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord. Only one who sincerely takes to the loving service of the Lord shall defeat the enemy of lust. This is the order of the Lord. There is no alternative. And simultaneously, all desired results are to be attained by executing devotional service to the Lord. As stated earlier, not all living entities situated in this world are established nicely to understand things as they are. Fortunately, human beings are endowed in this way. Therefore, one should be very enthusiastic about utilizing this human life by conquering the enemy of lust. This can be achieved by serving the blissful Lord under appropriate guidance. There is no other way. No other process shall reap the desired result in these matters. So in the matter of those that will never take to the service of the blissful Lord, who would rather eternally embrace this lust as the all-in-all attainment of happiness, there is so much distress to be endured. Scriptures in general are very adamant about guiding those situated in this world in the opposite direction of the embrace of lusty propensities. There is, however, an element that shall never see things as they are from the viewpoint of the Scripture. One can understand how things are situated cosmically in universal affairs by observing how things are manifest locally. The principles of evil that have become manifest in our field of activities are descending from somewhere. One who takes shelter of the knowledge descending in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord can understand all this. The principles of mafioso, of dictatorships, of dangerous cults, these aspects of controlling humans through the agency of fear are becoming manifest before us due to an evil element existing outside the jurisdiction of our introspection. Now, one of the main characteristics of being in control of another is that the individual being controlled has no definitive understanding of their master. You keep them in the dark and feed them stool, I believe is the saying. This is a core aspect of the relationship between the exploited and the exploiter, a defining truth of how one in a superior position deceives and cheats their victim. Now, in our current field of activities, there is an influence that has firmly grasped a hold of the human mentality through the described mental ethereal association. This element is giving its negative association by various methods. One who desires to progress towards spiritual freedom will find it very difficult without understanding how one is being influenced by this evil association. I'm going to explain how this unpalatable association is extending its tentacles into the sphere of human conditioning. This way, once one knows, one can make the appropriate choices to thwart the motivations of this negative influence. I can only explain how things are taking place. A definitive decision to sidestep this influence must come from the actual participant in all this. Thwarting the influence of this element is achieved by understanding how to act through the agency of knowledge. I'm not just declaring about this path, I'm traveling it and reaping the benefits of doing so, proof that you can also. Let's go over the characteristics of the ethereal realm again briefly. This activity of the mind by the embodied living entity can be described as a body, a vessel for engaging in activity. The same way a group of armed soldiers can easily convince one unarmed to participate in their desires, the same is possible upon the ethereal realm. The difference is that bullets will actually stop the functions of one's material body, while this influence upon the ethereal platform is playing upon the sphere of non-existence, the fear of death. The spirit soul shall live on after the death of the material body. This is unknown to us. Therefore, this ignorance of the truth, which is presently in abundant supply, can be used as a weapon to influence us. This is exactly what is taking place as a whole in the exploitation of humans by these celestial beings. They are using our fear of demise as a weapon against us, to control us. Why would they do this? There is motivation, and it is all a bit complicated. I'm going to be frank. There is a lot I could speak of in relationship to all this that I shall not. I'm trying to give a broad illustration of what is taking place. Some things should only be discussed among the faithful. It's not appropriate to discuss some things in a public forum. So basically, you don't like the idea of celestial beings? No problem, because you can replace celestial beings with their counterparts, the foolish politicians of this planet. These celestial beings are situated as a shadow government in human affairs. World leaders are using the same tactics to influence and control the common man. This evil influence, this exploitation, is descending from somewhere, is what I'm illustrating. Those who take shelter of the guidance of the spiritual teachers coming in the line of disciplic succession can understand how this is taking place. Others have limited to no actual understanding of these matters. The best illustration in nature I can give of the situation is how the Komodo dragons kill their prey. The Komodo will bite its victim. The animal will gradually become weaker and weaker due to the poisonous bite. The whole time the Komodo dragons are harassing the animal day and night, until finally the animal will collapse and the dragons will devour their prey. This is the gravity of the situation. You could see many suffering from grave health problems due to consuming things they ultimately don't need, things that are actually poisonous in reality. As they continue, their health gradually deteriorates in so many ways, yet they cannot stop the dangerous activities. All the time there's an element there to offer so many solutions to their suffering at a price, draining the individuals of their money to solve problems that would not be of issue if not for the activities they choose to partake in. This is the reality of the situation, all with its foundation rooted in poisonous leadership with ill intent. Now, the reach of these evildoers can be described as significant. By influencing the food, the knowledge, they have become very deeply entrenched into human affairs. It is very difficult to get outside their influence. However, it is possible. They can have no significant influence on one who has surrendered to the all-powerful, merciful Lord. The Lord assures us of this in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 6. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So in this verse, the Lord is assuring us that he shall protect one who surrenders to his loving service. Let's say you live in a bad neighborhood, a neighborhood plagued with gangs. You may feel that you shall perish if you stand alone. This may give you the inclination to join one or another gang to ensure safety. If I came and said to you, do not worry, I shall protect you from all these dangerous elements, you would have to be a fool to take me seriously. I don't have the capacity to accomplish this. Similarly, nor does any living entity in this material realm have the capacity to protect anyone from the clutches of death. Delivering one from death is the Lord's business. No one else can walk within his shoes in this matter. Some would like us to believe they could. So this is a cheating business of rascals. Even one who has surrendered to the service of the Lord will have to give up the present material body. This is inevitable. However, one who surrenders to the Lord will not be required to take another material body. Such a faithful soul will attain a body beyond the confines of death. a spiritual body fit for associating with the Lord in the spiritual realm. So it can be a little difficult to understand this because it takes faith. The definition of faith is to believe in something sublime. Prabhupada explained the situation as making good use of a bad bargain. We have come in contact with this material world. The proof of this is that we all possess material bodies that are subject to the laws of nature and within the jurisdiction of death. So making use of the body to engage in the service of the Lord can be defined as the best use of a bad bargain. So when the Lord says, "Do like this, I shall protect you," one should immediately act accordingly and do as the Lord requests. This is properly using one's intelligence. This world is inundated with individuals that refuse to surrender to the desires of the Lord. Therefore, there is so much quarrel and distress to be experienced in so many fashions. One individual is saying, "I'm the supreme." Another is very adamant about their ultimate supremacy. In reality, none of them are actually supreme. There are many controllers within this world. One appears to be the controller of another. The Supreme Lord is the ultimate controller. If one does not recognize the Lord and engage in his service, one will be forced to surrender elsewhere to some other personality. But no good shall come from surrendering elsewhere. This is unknown to us, therefore we suffer. Some would like us to believe there are so many paths which ultimately all lead to the same destination. This is simply not so. This is, again, a manifestation of the cheating propensity of rascal upstarts. We are being kept in the dark and fed lies. So many manufactured forms of religion, cheating religions. Do like this, and I shall be pleased with you. And if you do otherwise, you will meet with grave consequences. These lowercase supreme lords, who are all busy fighting with each other over dominion, are suggesting the same thing as the real Lord is suggesting. They are suggesting we surrender to their desires to ensure safety. However, these supreme lords cannot successfully save themselves from death. What to speak of us? Better to surrender where real protection rests, at the feet of the supreme blissful Lord. So the embodied living entities situated as materially advanced are busy enthusiastically fighting with one another about dominion over human beings. Like I stated earlier, the way one can understand what is taking place on a broader scale is by observing what is happening locally. In reality, there is a direct correlation between the two situations. Just as institutions are fighting over aspects of our lives here, the same is taking place cosmically. Humans are being treated as if livestock, which is, in essence, the reality of the situation. See, the vitality of human consciousness is diminished when one becomes too reliant upon the mercy of others. One's energy can be identified as a strength. It can be big and strong like the muscles of a bodybuilder, or feeble and weak, similar to one struck with a debilitating disease. Human energy becomes more and more removed by making unwise decisions. This transforms a human who is situated very nicely to understand high aspects of spiritual truths into a beast of burden. Some humans are doing this to one another on a localized platform. World leaders are exploiting the common man on a larger level, and these celestial beings are using these methods of exploitation on a broader scale. As these material advanced beings fight with each other, they remain unaware that they are also being exploited by the enemy of everyone. This lust, this motivation to attain dominion, to become the supreme, is actually, in reality, exploiting them. So no individual, except for one sincerely engaged in loving service of the Lord, can be free from exploitation in this material realm. This is the nature of the material world, and most are situated as uninclined to hear about the solution to all their self-imposed distress, the engagement in the service of the merciful Lord. Now, how is the human being transformed into a beast of burden? This has a great deal to do with the mercantile exchange of bad karma. It's not far different from the exchange illustrated in The Green Mile, how John Coffey was taking on negative energy. See, again, one can understand what is happening on the subtle level by taking into consideration what is happening on the gross level. An example, when one consumes foodstuffs, there's an energy that can be categorized as beneficial and toxins and undesirable qualities that are dispelled from the body as excrement and urine. This is a reality on the subtle level as well, in both what one consumes as food and what is accepted into one's consciousness as knowledge through hearing. One is listening to the finest sound vibrations at a live symphony, while another is engaged in listening to the grunts and moans of some pornographic film. So it's possible, by sharing energies, for a transference of negative energy from one to another. When I say sharing energies, I'm referring to the entire spectrum of sharing. It certainly begins with food, then gets broader in definition, sharing gas, electricity, sewage and waste disposal, and even progeny, which girls and boys join together to produce children. So these are all defined as energies that are shared. We are sharing these energies locally with friends and family, as communities, and broadly as nations. Please allow me to illustrate. Due to some inclination that has developed on account of bad association, one may be very attracted to pornography. So the idea by some is that while you are on your way to hell, here, take my negative refuse as well. So one is left with the essence of negative energy, and the other is full with positive energy. This deception, this transfer, is all facilitated by sharing energies. One who understands the ins and outs of all this benefits, while another does not and suffers. So the choices one becomes accustomed to make in regards to what one eats are significant. Now when I say eat, I'm referring broadly to what one consumes as food. It also encompasses what one consumes in the way of knowledge as explained. This also includes one's inclination towards particular sound vibrations in the form of music. In a nutshell, in regards to all this, what one hears and speaks about, with an emphasis on what one hears about, is gravely significant. Sound is the foundation for acquiring knowledge, so naturally, whatever one hears about contributes to the foundation for one's convictions. Where one hears from is very significant and encompasses a great deal of whether one suffers or enjoys. What one reads about also constitutes where one hears from, so it's hearing in a broad sense. So all this is being manipulated by those who know to exploit those who do not know. I enjoyed the illustration of Michael Moore that accentuated all this. In Bowling for Columbine, Mr. Moore examined the reality that on average, 10,000 murders, this is a low average, occur yearly in America. Just across the border in Canada, there's an average of 500 murders a year. Why are people in Canada not killing each other the way Americans are? Listen to the rhetoric of the politicians in Canada and their daily news report. These reservoirs of knowledge sound very different from the same sources in America. So where you hear from is very significant and has a vast influence upon the consciousness. So like I stated, this is all being manipulated by those who know all this. So knowledge is power. In this world of the cheaters and the cheated, knowledge is often used inappropriately. One group is enjoying a very tranquil existence because they are very clever. By sharing energies with an unknowing other group, the group not in the know is carrying twice the amount of negativity, making those not in the know beasts of burden for the wise. This is a product of the nonsensical speculations of those that do not have an acute understanding of their own ultimate benefit. This live and let die philosophy never ends well. This will practically, without fail, always backfire. So in reality, all one's hard effort in trying to buck the system becomes the very essence of one's defeat. This all has a tendency to occur without one's full understanding. The reality of the situation has a tendency to smash one to pieces as if being run over by a train. In a broader sense, this defeat is all meant to facilitate a rehabilitation in the embodied living being's core desires and consciousness. This live and let die mentality is the product of wild mental speculation that is based on temporary objectives, being edged on by foolish leaders who are similarly bewildered. After many failed attempts at this trickery, the idea is that eventually one will become frustrated with all this mental speculation and surrender to the loving service of the Lord. So, in reality, if one carries on with these selfish motivations, one will certainly suffer gravely. This is not a curse, it's a fact. The outcome of this live and let die philosophy always concludes in disaster. One must accept that some may never surrender to the Lord's service, or they may, but only after an inestimably vast duration of time. There are some that are in this category that have their finger on the trigger in a great deal of matters that concern our spiritual welfare. So if one does not understand things appropriately, especially how one is being influenced, how can one ever make tangible spiritual progress? The solution is quite simple. The choices one makes in regards to one's common dealings are factually empowering those that wish to hold the post of oppressing tyrant, lending strength to our oppression. This system of evil dominance is gaining its nourishment from what we consume as food and knowledge through the agency of tantric energy. Also, by being uncontrolled in these two aspects of one's life, it becomes very difficult to control one's sex desire. Therefore, this spilt sexual energy is also empowering this unpalatable influence. When I say spilt energy, I'm referring to the male ejaculate of semen, which, in reality, is the essence of one's life force. It's a fact that it takes a great deal of energy for the body to produce semen, so it is, in essence, more of a representation of life force than even blood. It is the fashion now, either through manual stimulation or not completing the act of sexual intercourse with the consummation of a child, to capriciously discharge semen. This is on account of having an uncontrolled mind. All this is being perpetuated by the entire atmosphere being saturated with sexual lust. This is not at all an accident. This wasted life energy is a hot commodity on the subtle level. It's collected, and the tantric energy is being harnessed to make some of these otherworldly beings very powerful. See, if you have one candle in a room, you really don't have a significant amount of energy represented. Now, if you have 1,000,000 candles in a room, this is a different story. What I want to illustrate is that this wasted life energy is being harnessed simultaneously by the continuous unnecessary discharge of one's life force in the form of semen. One becomes very weak physically and mentally. This all makes one more susceptible to being controlled on so many different platforms. By empowering our oppressors by making bad choices, we become a key ingredient in our own exploitation. If one thoroughly understands how all this is taking place, one could discontinue making unpalatable life decisions to facilitate one's own freedom. This undoubtedly can be a bit of a trick to accomplish. However, it is possible. The natural situation is that it may be a bit painful to control the mind and senses in the beginning. Fortunately, it does become easier to control oneself through practice. Then one harvests the benefits by factually bringing the mind under control. Remember how I explained that the mode of passion tastes sweet in the beginning only to conclude as poisonous? Well, the mode of goodness is the exact opposite. It tastes like poison in the beginning and concludes very sweet. Real living begins when one brings the mind under the control of purified intelligence. So one may be feeling the negative effects of carrying more than their fair share of bad energy, even if you are not. Better not to assume you will always be on the positive side of the pendulum. Fickle bunch this lot is. They don't always hold true to their blessings. Make one wrong move and you could find yourself eating worms. For the ones already feeling the negative effects of these nefarious activities, by unknowingly carrying the burden of others that are being deceptive in this fashion, one will find it nearly impossible to attain peace. All the time one is being demoralized into believing that the fault is one is defective. It is not that one is a bad person. One may be overweight or cannot resist over-consuming alcohol and drugs. One may be out of control with sexual desire. In reality, one is carrying the negative burden of others due to this trickery, this sharing of energies. This is the core reason one is suffering in these ways. This is an unknown factor, and some would like you never to understand this because they desire you continue to carry their burden. So it can be categorized as a very lamentable situation. However, there is hope. Very soon in this chapter, I'll prescribe a test run, a formula for the inquisitive to free themselves from this negativity, a prescription one can take and reap the benefit of freeing oneself from this abuse, a formula that will not require a significant leap of faith to execute. One you could try and test what I'm illustrating for yourself. When you do test all this, you will see for yourself. Imagine this: I no longer feel so out of control of my life will be your realization. I guarantee this will be your conclusion if you follow this prescription very carefully. So this formula is coming very soon. First, I want to explain a few more aspects of this transfer of bad karma and how those with ill motivations execute these nefarious activities. In Chapter 2, I gave a brief description of the concept of mystic cities or mystical perfections, how these mystical perfections of knowledge are being grossly displayed at present by the utilization of modern technology. An example, it is described that there is a mystical perfection that allows one to become very light and fly in the sky. A gross manifestation of this perfection is currently being displayed by traveling in planes and helicopters. So there is another mystical perfection that has a direct correlation with the exploitation of the unknowing. In Vedic terms, it is called the Vasita perfection. This Vasita perfection allows one to bring another under their control through the agency of hypnotism and is nearly irresistible. In Greek literature, it is described that there are celestial beings that possess this mystical perfection through singing. They are known as sirens or nymphs and are feminine in nature. So this is not a myth. They do actually exist. I realize this is all a bit mysterious, but I appeal to you to hear me out on all this. We are actually being influenced by the utilization of this Vasita mysticism being displayed through the agency of technology. Just try to recollect in your own experience how all this may be taking place. If immediately the blasting of ambulance and police sirens, the excruciatingly loud horn of a train comes to mind, you would be right on target. This is similar to how planes and helicopters are a gross form of the mysticism to levitate. These sirens and horns are a gross form of this Vasita perfection of hypnotism. It has a direct effect on the human psyche to precipitate a reaction of fear. Just in case you forgot to be afraid, the blasting of these sound vibrations are there to remind you to be fearful, lending to one's mental enslavement by keeping one always afraid. One who is always afraid is significantly easier to control on so many different platforms. Now, another form of this Vasita mystical hypnotism is being executed in the form of enchantment. This is taking place through the utilization of the pentatonic music system. It is our music. Rock and roll, rap, and country music are all based on the pentatonic music system. So this system of music is, in its fullest manifestation, in the tuning arrangement of the guitar and other similar instruments. This music system has a direct link with sexual desire and sexual bliss. The embodied living beings subconsciously make a direct connection between this music system and sexual bliss. Who can say they are free from sex desire? Not many. Therefore, this music system really strikes a chord within the psyche of the living entities in this material realm. This is another form of utilizing this mysterious system of Vasita hypnotism. An example, you may desire to stop drinking. When you do stop, you feel as if the drink is calling you. Well, it is calling you, because those that wish to drown you in drink are using this Vasita system to attract your mind. See, this is another transfer of negative energy. Some, being on the positive side of the pendulum, drink carelessly without any detrimental effects on their life, without falling under the sway of overconsumption. This is because they are not carrying their fair share of the negative effects of drinking. By sharing energies, another unknowing group is carrying double the amount of the negative aspects and falls deeply under the drink's control. This is all because of this transfer of negativity. Again, the live and let die philosophy. The rich man can ride, while the hobo is left to drown. So one's susceptibility to this mystical hypnotism has a starting point. It begins with what one consumes as food and who one breaks bread with. If you are eating at McDonald's, you are breaking bread with all those who eat there. You can see how this can get complex very quickly. This all has very old roots in Vedic knowledge, the concept of a lucky Buddha. So the whole village or localized community shares energy in the form of foodstuffs with a particular person. One person, either knowingly or not, takes on the negativity for all those breaking bread together. The person becomes the community's savior in this way. But the goals are all material in nature. Yes, using an individual as a human recycling bin does lend to one being surcharged with positive energy. However, this shall not save one from the clutches of death. Therefore, the cycle only remains perpetual and carries no ultimate spiritual benefit. This motivation only serves to fulfill temporary goals. Moving on, your food is the initial composition of your blood, your life force. One is becoming susceptible to this Vasita control by what one eats as food. This is ground zero for this influence. As stated, by this oppression, one is becoming more and more demoralized by the negative effects of carrying the burden of others. This lends to becoming more entangled in all these complexities and begins with what one eats and who with. So this enchanting hypnotic mysticism of this Vasita potency has a direct connection with the Supreme Lord and his blissful spiritual activities in the spiritual realm. This material realm is but a reflection of the spiritual reality. The aspects of the Lord's activities situated as the sweetest in the spiritual realm tend to be the most abominable when imitated in this material realm. The Lord is accustomed to play on his flute in the spiritual world. By doing so, he attracts the minds of all the inhabitants there. All those living in the association of the Lord factually become overwhelmed with spiritual ecstasy by the musical compositions of the blissful Lord. So when the unscrupulous engage in this enchantment here in this material realm, it becomes the most detesting display of cheating and exploitation, the exact opposite result of the Lord's artistry. This is the reality of all this and lends strength to why one should give up their occupation of this world of deceit and return to the realm of spiritual bliss in the association of the Lord. This concludes my illustration of the aspects of this Vasita mysticism of enchantment through music and other sound vibrations used to instill fear, such as ambulance and police sirens. The sound vibration of train whistles are also included in all this. There are other sound vibrations that are also being used. These describe sound vibrations being the most prominent. The argument can be put forward that, no, these sound vibrations only have one purpose to serve. Only one purpose is served that is situated as self-evident. There is another reality to all this that remains outside the jurisdiction of our introspection. One consumed with doubt can have no access to this other perspective. Ultimately, this want for an understanding of things in their entirety lends itself to why this other reality can exist at all. Its foundation is rooted in our ignorance. So how can one become transcendental to all this? I wouldn't call it easy. However, it is very possible to become free. At the end of this text, I will put forth my full prescription of how to factually surrender to the devotional service of the Lord, how one can become free both presently and in the future from being exploited by this lust. Right now, I want to offer a test run experiment for the inquisitive. It's not going to take a large leap of faith to execute. My desire is to provide one an opportunity to examine for oneself the strength of this spiritual knowledge, to directly perceive tangible positive results. First, let's talk about the consumption of food, because without influencing what one consumes and digests as food, it becomes nearly impossible to affect one with this faceta mystical hypnotism. Therefore, one must only, and when I say only, this means without any exception, cook for oneself. This includes the interruption of consuming any grains cooked elsewhere, instant rice, breads, beers, sodas, nothing instant at all. This basically means absolutely no eating at restaurants at all. No snacks in the form of chips or nuts either. This includes all processed foods such as cheeses and broths. No one can even assist you by bringing ingredients on any manner on a localized level. Just so you know, this is certainly going to be the tricky part, because it is quite possible people you love are going to bring things to you with great affection. Unfortunately, their love sadly can be described as a bullet. The best example that illustrates this is the story of Adam and Eve. Eve may have brought the fruit to Adam with great affection. However, she did not have a full understanding of her own ultimate welfare. Therefore, her love was a bullet. Not because she didn't have affection for Adam. Rather, she simply did not understand the reality of her or Adam's welfare in total. This is one of the hardest truths to grasp, because no one wants to believe that there may be a malicious influence using the ones held dear to deceive and bewilder. Unfortunately, this is a sad reality of the situation in this material realm. Oftentimes I will accept such gifts and simply not consume them. This way there is no question of being rude. Sometimes this is not possible, and I will have to flat out refuse such gifts. Generally, one should always be truthful. However, if one needs to bend the truth a bit here to refuse such gifts, then this is what one should do. I usually reference my allergies. This is ultimately not untruthful for so many reasons. Now, obviously, one has to be assisted to some degree. An example, stores are bringing us ingredients. So this means the localized aspects should be conducted completely by oneself. You should be picking up all ingredients for your food preparations personally. You should be the only one preparing these ingredients. All prepared from wholesome, unprocessed ingredients to the best of your ability. The less processed the ingredients are, the better. Obviously, unless you're living on a farm picking your own vegetables and making your own butter, there will be some processing of your food ingredients. One should completely avoid sauces and cheeses prepared elsewhere. Grains are very important and should only be consumed when prepared by oneself. This means no picking up breads at the store. Any grains you eat must be prepared personally without exception. Unfortunately, there has been a type of infiltration in the matter of places of worship, so this includes temple, church, and mosque foods as well. Only vegetarian ingredients are recommended. If you are too attached to eating meat, then only lower animals should be consumed and kept to a minimum, such as birds and fish. No red meat. Yes, pork is considered red meat. Refrain from tasting your food before it is prepared. Say a short prayer before consuming your food. Make sure in your prayer you pray to God however you understand God, using God's name in the prayer. Not just praying to God. You must use the Lord's name however you understand the Lord's name. Obviously, this process will have absolutely no effect if you pray to Jimi Hendrix or any other personality situated in this material world, because this is how you understand God. Others can eat your cooking. However, during the duration of this experiment, I would recommend an entire month. By no means shall you eat anything you did not cook yourself. I would suggest refraining from alcohol entirely. If this is not possible, you must make your own beer or wine. No prepared store-bought sodas, coffees, or teas. If you desire these things, you must prepare them yourself without exception. This all isn't something one can go at halfway. It's all or nothing. So this covers food. Now you want to get away from all technologies for an hour a day. This should be done at dawn, started when the first bird starts singing. You should be out on a walk away from all technologies. Therefore, a treadmill will not work. Outside, away from all cell phones, electricity, and iPods is desired. 1 hour at dawn. Every effort should be made to execute this walk away from technologies at dawn. If this for some reason is absolutely not possible, it can be done at some other time of the day. What you are doing at dawn is significant. Please do not be sound asleep in your bed when the first bird starts singing to announce the beginning of dawn. Better if one is engaged in prayer while walking. Make sure you pray using the Lord's name as you understand it. The last prescription is to control your sex desire. It may be difficult, however, this is a crucial point of contact and must be minimized. No checking out girls' bodies, and same goes for girls checking out guys. Also, in the control of sex desire, no manual stimulation, no wasting any semen. One should control the tongue by refraining from swearing as well. One must also regulate the consumption of food. I personally fast till 4:30 p.m. daily without exception. If this does not seem possible, fast till noon every day to start. You will find fasting becomes easier as you do it. bringing the eating process under control through regulation will exponentially make controlling the other aspects of one's life easier. Therefore, I do recommend some strict regulation in the matter of consuming food. Now, this may be a bit shocking, but the use of tobacco is going to make this fasting much easier. So if you are fond of tobacco, you stand at an advantage in all this. I drink water all day to help assist me in fasting till evening. If you are not fond of tobacco, you can chew gum. So by taking this rather simple prescription, you are going to notice that your psychological composition is going to drastically improve. This is due to the result of detaching oneself from being too reliant upon the mercy of others. If you can visualize the existence of an animal is enthusiastically eating out of the hand of another. Therefore, the one supplying the foodstuff is a fundamental aspect of God to that animal. By only consuming things that one prepares personally, one separates oneself from this reality. This is essential. See, currently the notion is that you can believe whatever you desire to believe because all paths lead to the same destination. This is not at all true. However, this is a nonsense being propagated. Believe whatever you desire, as long as you participate in the system. This is currently the design. How is one participating? We are defining how we participate by the choices we make according to what we consume as food, whether you choose Coke or Pepsi, choose McDonald's or Burger King, etc. So the program I am setting forth for your consideration is going to separate you from this reality. It is, in essence, a refusal to participate because you're not going to be consuming any of these things. By executing this program of self-control, if one is very observant, one will be able to perceive the influence of these otherworldly beings. See, the idea of aliens is a bit childish, with its foundation in not completely understanding things as they are. Don't think that otherworldly beings need to descend in flying saucers to have a relevance in our activities. These beings are already manifest within our field of activities. In reality, we are being influenced in a much more subtle way. It's the drink one starts the day with, the foodstuff one is regularly taking part in consuming, whether one chooses Coke or Pepsi. These are the core aspects of how we are being influenced. We are actually desiring how we shall be influenced by the choices we make. When you take up my prescription of regulation and independence and become aloof from consuming all these products, I can guarantee you will meet with opposition from this unpalatable element. One should understand that the tactics used by these evildoers are simply intimidation tactics. They really have no say as to whether or not one shall be left out in the cold to starve or be killed. They are situated as predominating deities of fear. That is all. They do not wish that you control yourself. In fact, they are fully convinced that this is actually impossible. By taking control of your life through regulation, you are not lending to the advancement in their malicious motivations. This will not be invited. This should be understood appropriately. All threats made by these material advanced living entities should be understood as the intimidation tactics used by fearmongers. They have fear as their greatest weapon against us. That is all. The less one is afraid, the less powerful these celestial beings become. As the Lord issues his final order to not be fearful, I am as well. When you incorporate these tactics of freedom by beginning the process of controlling the mind and becoming regulated in your activities, you are directly taking the initial steps to surrendering to the desires of the all-powerful, merciful Lord. Therefore, one need not fear because one is under the Lord's protection. And unlike the protection of any other personality, the Lord's protection is absolute. It is the fashion that one is being encouraged to take shelter anywhere other than the Lord's protection. Take shelter of the police, of one's dog, of one's family and friends. The reality of the situation is that these are all fallible soldiers that shall disappoint. The Lord shall not disappoint. This is unknown, therefore the Lord's protection is neglected. Like I stated earlier, I can only show one the door to freedom. One must make the definitive decision to walk through the door out of mental slavery oneself. Luck has nothing to do with it. Know you can and you will. Remember to pray over your food, and while doing so, be sure to use the Lord's name as you understand it. There are nearly as many individuals in this material realm that believe themselves to be God as there are not. So simply praying to God could be to anyone. When you get specific, using real names, you shall reap the desired benefits of prayer. Unfortunately, the second greatest weapon of this unpalatable influence is one's associates. The blanket of delusion has broadly been cast upon human culture on this planet. If one is not surrounded by transcendentalists, one can be misguided by the sincere, incorrect advice and association of loved ones and friends. This is how one becomes caught and bewildered by the agents of material nature. One's love is being used as a weapon to bewilder. Once again, I'm going to use the Blair Witch Project as an example. They are lost in the woods, unknowingly being hunted by a terrible witch. They wake up in the morning to find their friend missing. Left behind is his sweater. Wrapped in the sweater is a human tongue. The following night they are awoken to the voice of their friend calling out for help. Naturally, they run to the aid of their friend's voice in the dark woods. Unknowingly, they are being led directly into the trap of the witch and their ultimate demise. So this is the same situation as I'm attempting to illustrate. One's confidence and trust are being used as a weapon to deceive. This is all very lamentable and should be understood appropriately. This world is not saturated with those that possess a stout desire to find refuge from their suffering, accepting the pangs of material life as an inevitable fact of their existence. Nobody desires to suffer and ultimately die, yet we must do both in this material realm. Often happiness is mistaken for the absence of suffering, when in reality happiness exists distinctly separate from suffering and is to be had by one who sincerely engages in the loving service of the Lord. Most are not inclined to take all this into consideration. Therefore, going against the materialistic grain is shunned upon. It lends to others in your association having to deeply evaluate their own motivations. This rarely is invited openly. Naturally, others will attempt to invite you to view things from their perspective. However, one should resist this temptation. It directly lends strength to the complexities of escaping all mental speculation. One can still be cordial to friends and associates. However, if one desires the freedom from the pangs of old age, disease, and death, one must keep this goal distinct and in focus at all times. The goal of spiritual emancipation can go in and out of focus very easily on account of the long duration of one's material contact. Therefore, one must always be attentive. Otherwise, it will be very easy for one to lose focus and regress back into one's old ways. The easiest way to stay focused is to embrace a resolute determination while simultaneously having firm, immovable faith. Also, it is extremely helpful if one acts with a desire to relieve others from their suffering. See, by bringing oneself under control and acting appropriately in the execution of the Lord's service, one is actually becoming the friend of everyone, to all living entities. This is a supreme welfare work and begins with appropriate action and devotional service. This will be realized through its execution. So by taking this simple yet demanding challenge, one will factually perceive the benefit by becoming spiritually strong. Like I stated earlier, one's energy can be defined as a type of strength. By regular exercise, one becomes very fit. When exercise is put on the back burner, one becomes very weak. The threshold for one's spiritual strength, especially in the beginning, is certainly a fine line. The order of the Lord is that there shall be no sitting idle. One is either moving forward towards spiritual liberation or digressing away from it. The edge of the pendulum between the two is definitely a tightrope walk in the beginning. Therefore, please be very careful and attentive in the matter of one's activities and consciousness. Now, there is a scheme being executed by the undesirables that should be addressed. This is taking place throughout the planet, especially in the Western Hemisphere, most prominently in the United States. Now, the laws surrounding the use of marijuana are simply ridiculous and have a direct link to the exploitation taking place upon the unknowing. Vedic culture, which has its origin upon this planet in India, does not take the use of ganja very seriously. It certainly is not openly distributed by the government. However, it is accepted. A certain classification of yogi engages in using ganja, and it is condoned by law enforcement. There is no question of one being imprisoned for any significant amount of time for its consumption. I would suggest not using ganja. The human intelligence needs to be very sharp to understand higher aspects of spiritual truths. It may appear that ganja facilitates high thinking. However, its effects tend to peak, followed by a severe depression in finer thinking. Therefore, its use should be avoided. There is a clever trick being executed upon those who partake in the consumption of marijuana in the Western countries. See, upon the subtle level, the ethereal realm, there are politics. It can be a bit difficult to conceptualize. Regardless, the politics upon the subtle level are just as intricate as the politics on the gross level. In reality, a direct correlation between the two exists. The greatness of the Lord must be accepted to understand all this. Then, it all becomes clear how this is all taking place by the grace of the Lord. Please allow me to explain the scam being executed upon the unknowing in regards to these marijuana laws. By sharing energies and utilizing another as a beast of burden karmically, the exploiter takes on a certain responsibility for those being exploited. The exploited are basically slaves to their exploiters. Therefore, there is a certain liability for the welfare of the slaves that exists on the part of the masters. These marijuana laws are being manipulated to produce a loophole to free the rascals from this liability. See, the clever rascals take service from their slaves by loading upon them their bad karmic energy. Then, at the end, at the time of death of their servants, they wash their hands of them. Take them away, they are criminals. Isn't that nice? Yes, go use marijuana, says the state, while it's still considered criminal by the government as a whole. Then the user of ganja is taken away at the time of death as a criminal by the part of the government that considers ganja's use forbidden, leaving the clever rascals free from any liability for those that have been utilized as servants. It's a very clever little scheme to avoid prosecution for being neglectful dependents. Once again, the live and let die philosophy. All is certainly not finished at the time of death. Therefore, one is taken away from this gross realm at the time of death and punished as a criminal for using marijuana, the result of being poisoned by bad leadership with malicious intent. Therefore, the easiest way to sidestep this trickery is to simply not partake in the consumption of ganja. This way one will not be involved in all these intricacies. Once again, another manifestation of the cheating that takes place in this material realm. We would all like to enthusiastically envision a situation in this world of unadulterated happiness. The reality is that this shall never materialize. Some, at the cost of all others, are prepared to exploit others in an attempt to secure some peace. Unfortunately, such mental speculators are not at all inclined to hear of the futility that rests in doing so. Therefore, such speculators factually set the scene for their own ultimate demise in so many fashions. I'm now going to illustrate the concocted religious principles of these speculative wranglers. Real religious principles are disseminating directly from the Lord to facilitate the spiritual living entities situated in the material realm. The Lord desires that the living entities here ultimately become liberated and return to the spiritual realm. This is accomplished by following the plan of the Lord laid out in religiosity. Some blinded by deeply rooted material desire shall not hear of this reality. Therefore, they enthusiastically create a system of religious principles accustomed to their own desires and motivations. Having assumed that they have somehow ascended to a supreme godlike position, they bless the world with their interpretation of religiosity. Of course, one so bewildered unceremoniously installs himself as the benefactor of all such activities, unaware that all such cheating will be brought to a close in due course of time. This religion manufacturing is happening repeatedly. Only the names of those engaged in this wild mental speculation change, while the core misconceptions leading to all this remain consistent. All such cheating is rooted in the desire to become one in all manners with the real, eternally blissful Lord. So the Lord frankly gives his ultimate declaration about those so engaged in chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, texts 11 and 12. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So we should take the Lord's statements here as authoritative and absolute. None of us can completely understand the outcome of our present life. Naturally, when we think of all others, we envision them to be similar to ourselves, limited. The Lord is a person. However, he is not limited as we are. Therefore, when the Lord authoritatively speaks of future events, we should understand that things are factually situated as the Lord declares. The Lord is frankly declaring that all manufactured ideas that are inherently separate from the primary goal of this material realm, the ultimate rehabilitation of the embodied soul's consciousness, should understood to be futile. Such concocted ideas shall end in defeat. Some shall never tightly grasp this reality. Therefore, for those who have cultivated such a mentality, there is so much distress just waiting to be endured. I shall now illustrate the fundamental aspects of the concocted religious principles that currently are prominent upon this planet. These ideas are all descending from a central location. Those practicing these speculated principles of religiosity may or may not fully understand the origin of such speculations. How these ideas are descending and spreading can be compared to the game of bowling. The cause of the speculations being the ball, and the individuals being influenced compared to the pins. The pins are struck by the ball and colliding into one another, being knocked over. So this is the same way these ideas are being perpetuated among the unknowing. These deluded speculations are being spread through association. One comes in contact with the wrong association. As a result, one becomes ensnared by the manufacture of these concocted religious practices. This takes place through the medium of associating with one who has already become enslaved. If one does not have an acute understanding of the actual Supreme Lord, one can be deceived into believing another is a supreme. This is accomplished through some display of opulence in the likes of the actual Lord. However, this is simply a limited display. Surely such displays may seem fantastic from a human perspective. However, the Lord is the powerhouse of all such opulence and exists completely separate from the living entities here within the jurisdiction of death. Regardless of how powerful such living entities may appear, all such living entities shall be annihilated in due course. An undisputable fact within this material world. The real Lord is not this kind of God. See, the idea of God has many branches. Like I described earlier, one feeding an animal is a definitive aspect of God to that animal. If one does not possess a concrete understanding of the true Lord, one simply mistakes the Lord for a competitor of these self-created lords. This is not the true reality of the situation at all. The Lord is the essence of every living entity's life force, including these materially advanced living entities. So what you do not know can certainly hurt you. Often, one is coerced into signing on to these fantastic speculations without a full understanding of what one is doing. It does not lend to the motivations of the preceptors of these speculations to have their victims understand what is ultimately taking place. Therefore, such victims are kept in the dark and fed lies. This is all the product of clever cheating. These materially advanced living entities would like very much to annihilate the real Lord and unceremoniously take the Lord's position. Maybe such a fantasy may successfully be perpetuated for some time. Ultimately, all such cheating shall come to its close. This is inevitable, similar to how someone partying the night away may hope that the sun shall never rise. In reality, the sun shall certainly rise, regardless of one's desire to have an endless night of celebration. So this is, in essence, how these speculations are spreading, similar to an infection. So these ideas that are descending may have their source in an element that is very old according to human calculation. Reverend Gary Davis explained that the song Children of Zion has been passed down and sung for over 500 years. He was actually unsure of its exact date of origin. The chorus, "Let me know which way you're traveling, amen," being at the core of this song. However, compared to eternity, 500 years is as significant as a lightning flash, actually less significant. Real religious principles have no origin, being eternal and directly inaugurated by the real Supreme Lord, who also has no origin. It's difficult to conceptualize within our current jurisdiction of introspection. Regardless, the Supreme Lord has no origin. There never was a time when the Lord did not exist. There are beings situated in this material universe that have lifespans that are inestimably greater than humans. However, these beings are not outside the clutches of death, and their lives shall eventually end. It may seem fantastic that they possess such longevity from a human perspective. In reality, they live for only 100 of their years, similar to humans. Their years are considerably different from our years. So the longevity of different classifications of embodied living beings varies considerably. Similar to how small germs and insects may not be able to grasp the reality of our lifespan in comparison to their own, which may last only a few seconds. This is all being arranged and under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord, being displayed through the wonderful activities of this material nature. This is all explained in Vedic truths. One who is inclined to receive these truths through the appropriate channel descending from the Lord can understand how this is taking place through the agency of the Lord's grace. These speculated religious ideas can be described more accurately as the rules of a game. Such speculations are simply augmentations of real religious principles, all being the product of wild ideas tainted with the contamination of lusty propensities. They exist in order to serve some materialistic motivation that actually has no foundation in spiritual growth. Sometimes these ideas are propagated in the guise of spirituality. However, the ultimate goal is skewed. Therefore, such ideas are only misunderstood as spiritual activities. See, in the minds of the bewildered participants in all this, the fraud is the reality. As long as the fraud is perpetuated, the fraud remains the reality. It's a circus of misunderstanding in reality. Proof that the mind of the mental speculator can certainly be identified as a bad neighborhood. I'm only going to address the main principles of this game of religiosity. These misconceptions are many-branched. The first principle of all this cheating, which trumps all others, is silence. The participants in these speculations, under the threat of death, shall never speak openly about all this cheating. Since all is based on deception, all must be kept the topmost secret. Of course, this is impossible due to the participants all being in the association of their uncontrolled minds and tongues. Therefore, naturally, they are always giving away their position. Unfortunately, they shall never come clean about all this tomfoolery, believing that their denial shall vindicate them in some way. The reality of the situation, at the end of the day in regards to all this nonsense, is that no one shall cheat death. This system has been creatively arranged for the benefactors of this foolishness to sidestep death. This will undoubtedly be unsuccessful. Death will cheat you. However, under no circumstances, no fantastic arrangements shall be successful in cheating death. This is the order of the Lord and stands true regardless of one's understanding of the Vedic principles. No mental speculation, regardless of its origin, shall be successful in thwarting the onslaught of death. So all the secrecy in the universe shall not be of any relevance in the ultimate reality of all this. The Supreme Lord is all-pervading, situated as the next-door neighbor in the heart of every living entity. It can certainly be difficult to conceptualize the existence of such a personality. Yet regardless, the Lord still remains manifest, despite our inability to understand his activities. Therefore, how shall anyone ever remain undiscovered? This is not possible. This futile secrecy has been initiated by the origin of these speculations to lend to the embrace of impersonalism by all participants. It has been designed to keep everyone's feelings and love out of sight and hidden. Love does not lend to the malicious motivations of the undesirable element initiating all this. Therefore, silence is essential. All this very much resembles the principles of a dangerous cult. More accurate is that dangerous cults are a product of these core speculated ideas. A mirrored manifestation of these methods of controlling others through brute force, manipulation, and fear. In dangerous cults, the members are certainly discouraged from speaking openly with one another. This lends to free thinking, which is certainly frowned upon. Another principle that can be counted among these childish ideas is the distorted relevance of the home. In the minds of the mental speculators, one is situated as God of their home. The nonsense being propagated is as follows. See, you are God, and simply have not realized this, unlike myself. This is how these rascals confuse their enslaved followers. Because in reality, the home is meant to be a dwelling place where the all-blissful Lord is installed as the ultimate enjoyer of all activities taking place there. By doing so, one's home becomes as blessed as the great places of pilgrimage, and everything flourishes harmoniously. The speculators shall not hear of this reality. Therefore, every home is its own universe, with the deluded participant situated as the ultimate enjoyer. Naturally, these bubbles of delusion are regularly colliding with one another, causing quarrel. One's neighbor is situated as a distant island, situated millions of miles away. As long as the neighbor's abode does not possess some opulence not found on one's own secluded sanctuary, there is no difficulty. However, if somehow one's neighbor does possess something that one lacks, immediately this becomes a great source of envy and distress. Naturally, since one is situated as God in their fantasy world, one's children become God's gift to the world, when in actuality, every one of us, without exception, is born into ignorance. Across the board, this is a fact. The appropriate action in regards to the welfare of one's child is to send the child to learn character from the advanced spiritual master. The child can then learn the value of human life and how to attain spiritual perfection. Once again, a reality that shall not be considered within the brains of the mental speculators. Therefore, they suffer so much strife and misery, dealing with children that have no discipline. This is absolutely not the child's fault. A child is like a blank canvas. Whatever is painted upon the canvas shall be the art attained. This is not taken into consideration. Therefore, in reality, the child sadly becomes a burden upon all living entities due to being untrained. Of course, the child is the product of an adult that has passed life untrained. Therefore, the struggle and strife that constitutes the fabric of all this suffering remains perpetual, all being inaugurated by bewildered leaders that possess deeply ingrained misconceptions of their own. I'm not throwing rocks. These are the facts, all stemming from the root of rebellion towards the loving service of the actual Lord. So those who have initiated these whimsical ritualistic practices embrace a deep envy of the genuine devotees of the Lord. This envy that has developed among human beings is a mirrored reflection of their animosity towards the devotees, all ultimately flourishing from a deeply rooted envy of the real, all-blissful Supreme Lord. These distorters of the truth fail to realize that the essence of their own life force is resting upon the one who they hate, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in reality, they hate themselves. Now, how can there be any channel of dialogue with one who hates themselves and has embraced a strong desire to destroy oneself? This is not possible. Therefore, being unwilling to ever accept the Lord, such bewildered embodied spirit souls leave no alternative to their annihilation. Their ultimate destruction is actually the Supreme Lord's mercy upon them. Having embraced such a sad consciousness, the Lord is actually relinquishing them from their self-imposed distress. However, the core polluted desire to envy the Lord remains deep in the core of their hearts. Therefore, they are repeatedly developing an unpalatable mentality and continuously being annihilated by the Lord. One should take into account the strong desire possessed by the Lord to rehabilitate these haters of the self. It is simply inconceivable the amount of energy the Lord invests in their rehabilitation, going to great lengths to incessantly offer them an opportunity to come around to the light. So let's hope someday they do come around. The last principle I will describe that is very prominent with all this speculation is the staunch worship of the dog. The idea descending is that if the beast is under one's control, ultimately there shall never exist an opportunity to be destroyed. As if the dog, with its phenomenal sense of smell, somehow cannot smell the scent of death that saturates these speculative wranglers due to mercilessly sending so many other helpless animals to the slaughterhouse for consumption. Yes, don't worship God, worship dog is the nonsense being propagated. It's sadly ironic that it is none other than dogs that greet the grossly sinful at the end of life to drag them away to their grave awaiting punishment, as if a very clever rascal is sitting back having a good laugh at the dismal fate of these victims of ignorance. So this personality of lust, often referred to in biblical terms as Satan, can only be defeated in one manner. This can be accomplished by sincerely surrendering to the blissful Lord through the medium of appropriate guidance. No other method shall result in any tangible success in this matter, no matter how ingenious the plan. Therefore, I strongly encourage one to give up all mental speculation and engage in the Lord's loving service. This is the solution to all distress being experienced at present, as well as all miseries that await in the future. This should be executed with firm faith and resolute determination, free from mental speculation. This is a summary of the main aspects of all this speculated foolishness. I shall now briefly describe how these embodied living entities, confused by mental speculation, deal with each other as well as all others. It's a dog-eat-dog mentality in reality. Sometimes there is an idea of love. However, if one executes some activity perceived as unpalatable to another, this love quickly vanishes. This is not the true definition of love. The aspects of the game of poker most accurately encapsulate their dealings with others. Since the goal to attain material possessions stands as their main objective, naturally, there is no hesitation on their part to use all accumulated resources to acquire money by any means possible. The mind of the speculator has a very detailed order of how their affection for others manifests. If someone, even one situated in their close circle of associates, becomes an impediment to their sense gratification in some way, they are fully prepared to use all available resources to destroy that person. This means, in actuality, there is no affection in their dealings for others whatsoever, not even for the ones that are supposedly held in affection. Real affection rests in understanding that all living entities are spiritual parts and parcels of the Lord. Therefore, there is not such a distinguished order of affection for one with such a vision. Of course, one has a certain obligation to their family. Therefore, their direct welfare must be seen to, but not at the cost of all others. One should accept whatever comes by honest endeavor as the mercy of the Lord. This leaves one free from any sinful liability in one's dealings. Not that one should be ready to cheat and destroy another for the benefit of one's immediate circle of associates. This is not respectful. Everyone should be properly respected and honored. Even one's enemies should be given proper respect. It is explained in Vedic culture, even when there is severe disagreement between two parties which results in war, the enemies would fight during the day and sometimes engage in friendly dealings at night. They are enemies, yet still they respect one another. Not this idea that I shall use any means available to deceive another behind their back to achieve some outcome. This is not the dealing of cultured individuals. It's the philosophy of jackals. I love you, however, not as much as I love another. Therefore I shall destroy you. This is bogus love. In reality, this is no kind of love at all, not even for the ones supposedly held dear. So to gain money to increase sense gratification, this is accepted as a topmost perfection in the minds of the confused mental speculators. And similar to the rules of poker, the more money you have, the more capable you are of attaining whatever wealth possessed by one who has less. Therefore, this leaning upon another is taking place in order to acquire whatever the weaker individual has. Accumulating money. This is the only way to measure wealth within the minds of the mental speculators. However, there is another wealth that they fail to take into consideration. It is a universal wealth, possessed by the wise engaged in real spiritual activities. Yes, the wealth of the spiritually motivated individual, which in reality stands as more valuable than money. It is the wealth of accumulated austerity. This currency, in the actual reality of things, is more powerful than material wealth. The currency of austerity situates one as solid as an immovable rock, and such a staunch individual's word cannot be checked by any means. This is the result of becoming strong by engagement in appropriate spiritual activities. This spiritual wealth remains unattainable by one in the association of one's uncontrolled mind and senses. Therefore, one should develop a strong desire to attain this spiritual wealth by performing spiritually motivated austerities. In reality, this is the real wealth that should deliver real peace to its owner. Such spiritual wealth can be attained by one who acts appropriately in the loving service of the merciful Lord under proper guidance. This is not taken into consideration within the mind of the mental speculator. Moving on, there are some officially engaged in the service of the Lord that do not factually accept the Lord. Due to a bad association, they have taken the stance of officially being devotees of the Lord. While so situated, their contaminated consciousness leads them to believe that the worship of the Supreme Lord is simply another variety of the speculated ritualistic activities described in this foolish game of material religiosity. Deep in their hearts, they feel they are simply presently playing the role of the Lord's devotee, being in the opinion that eventually they shall realize they are the Supreme. This is due to the skewed guidance of the unpalatable element that has inaugurated this cheating so popular on this planet. See, this undesirable element is very opposed to the untainted devotional service of the real Lord. Upon the departure of the spiritual master, the undesirables seek out every opportunity to infiltrate the system established to execute the pure loving service of the Lord. So there is always this battle between the propagators of goodness and ignorance. The headmasters of evil cannot face goodness directly. Therefore, they are regularly using black hat methods of sliding behind the back of the righteous. Evil may flourish for some time by using nefarious tactics. However, as the Lord frankly declares in chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, all such cheating shall ultimately be defeated. Not defeated just once, defeated again and again. So one may have been blessed with the fortune of association with a pure devotee. This, however, is the beginning of the path towards spiritual emancipation. Unfortunately, escaping all mental speculations can be a testing endeavor. There may be many breakdowns along the road of righteousness due to the trickery of ignorance. It may appear very difficult for one ensnared in the misconceptions being propagated by the undesirables to escape. However, it certainly is possible to escape. As stated earlier, the undesirables are situated as predominating deities of fear. They regularly use intimidation tactics. If you are neglectful of us, you shall lose all wealth and prosperity. This is their slogan. In reality, they have no say in these matters. They assert the impression of having such control, when in reality, they are only given such control by those who submit to their supremacy. Those who refuse to submit to such cheating, who rather submit to the real Lord, remain completely outside their jurisdiction. So this is the freedom owned by those who have faith in the real Lord. If one lends an oral reception to the genuine devotee of the Lord, one should factually come to the appropriate conclusion, this being that one's solution to all misconceptions rests in surrendering to the real Lord, not to some living entity situated within the clutches of death. This is the appropriate route of action. These are a few of the core principles embraced by the mental speculators. All these false ideas are descending throughout their enslaved followers. No good is to come from all this nonsense. Unfortunately, some are so invested in these ideas that they believe they have no choice but to go down with this very inglorious ship. This, however, is not necessary in reality. The propagators of these ritualistic practices would like all to believe that is all or nothing in these matters. However, this is not a fact. All material opulence is ultimately being distributed by the Supreme Lord. In reality, nothing can be had by anyone without the sanction of the Lord, the proprietor of everything. This is the meaning of dominion over all that be. Wealth and prosperity are not being distributed by those who have usurped the position of the Lord in the minds of the unknowing. Therefore, if one wholeheartedly surrenders to the Lord, there shall be no loss to be experienced. Against all good counsel, unfortunately, some will not take heed of this advice. So this is a very risky path. All can take a turn for the worse very easily without any warning. This is, again, the nature of this material realm. This is very lamentable, lending proof that this material realm is not a desirable place to be inhabited by any sane person. Some shall never hear of this reality and are repeatedly getting first-hand experience of why this is so. One is continuously being misguided by cheaters and meeting with grave consequences in this realm of sorrow. Once again, this is absolutely not taking place due to an ill will embraced by the Lord. Ultimately, when one embraces a desire to give up being punished, one will accept the mercy that is being delivered through the medium of the Lord's engaged servants. Let us hope that eventually such embodied souls confused by mental speculation shall listen to reason and come to realize the lucidity in the loving service of the blissful Lord. In closing, this world of matter is not suitable for envisioning any long-term plans of satisfaction and enjoyment. We are all situated here on account of a desire that has taken root within the heart to enjoy separately from the loving service of the Lord. This is ultimately not possible. One can fulfill this desire to experience enjoyment separate from the Lord's service without being utterly destroyed. This is accomplished by executing sacrifices to the Lord mapped out in detail within the scriptural injunctions. However, in reality, this is very difficult to accomplish within our current field of activities. Currently, every sphere of activity is so contaminated due to the nature of this age of quarrel, it is very difficult to correctly perform any complicated sacrifices. There is, however, no difficulty in performing the only sacrifice that shall deliver any actual lasting peace, this being the wholehearted surrender to the Lord's loving service. In fact, due to the Lord's great mercy upon us, there is no easier process for engaging in the Lord's service than what is available to all of us right now. If one chooses to act according to the instructions of the genuine devotee of the Lord, to redirect one's human energy towards the service of the Lord, one can become fully liberated. I will discuss this thoroughly within the following chapters. This surrender to the Lord's devotional service is the real standard for peace and prosperity, both on a localized level and as a global nation. Let us not submit to the will of the undesirables who wish to destroy this planet. The skewed reality of sense gratification and economic development shall bring no lasting peace, only sorrow. The reason being is that such a reality exists outside the jurisdiction of the Lord's desire for us as a whole. We are all situated as parts and parcels of the Lord. The Lord is the source, the reservoir of all eternal spiritual beings. Therefore, the source is meant to be satisfied by the parts and parcels. Srila Prabhupada regularly gave the following example. The hand is meant to satisfy the stomach, not to consume independently. The hand delivers foodstuff to the mouth. In turn, the edibles are delivered to the stomach. In this way, the entire system becomes satisfied, including the hand. What shall be the benefit of the hand enjoying independently of the stomach in the matter of consuming edibles? This is not possible. In the same way, by performing our appropriate activity by engaging in the Lord's service, one shall also become satisfied. Being reluctant to do this results in utter dissatisfaction. This is common sense. So, in reality, the solution to all distress being experienced locally, as well as the distress of the entire world, rests in the execution of devotional service to the blissful Lord.